Okay, welcome to io.js TC meeting 2015, January the 7th. We have myself, Rod, we've got Ben, Bert, Chris, Collins joining us for the first time, going to be voted on and added as a TC member. We've got Fedor and Isaac and Michael. So we're going to get straight into it and have a mini stand-up to begin with, just for people to share what they've been doing on the project. So we might go in order of, I think everyone's got the same order of people on their Hangout that I do, so we might start with Ben for a stand-up.
Yep. I have been working on fixing bugs in libuv. I have been fixing some bugs in io.js. I've been doing some optimizations. I am working on renaming the binary from node to io.js, as we agreed to a while ago. I have been doing an upgrade of V8. That's something we should discuss later on. And integrating the tick processor, the CPU profiler tick processor into the binary is also something I've been busy with, and that's about it for me. Bert?
All right, thanks. I always fail to remember. Next time I'll actually write it down. I worked on libuv most of the time. I remember fixing some issue with reader on Windows, building libuv with Clang, or making some progress in that area, and so I can build it with Clang CL now. And I've been working on basically making a plan for the next sort of unstable version of libuv, and I want to integrate the event loop implementation, or use a similar event loop implementation on Windows and Unix. And the first sort of tentative patches are there for review. And other than that, I don't know. The next one I think would be Colin, if he wants to. Oh no, Chris, if he wants to go.
Cool. I've been traipsing through the streams code, mostly looking at solving a failure on the v1x branch for npm. Turns out that the zlib thing that we merged recently broke assumptions. So fixing that. Other than that, just working on streams visualization stuff and documentation.
So that actually also, the zlib change also breaks on npm 2.x. It's all versions of npm get broken by that.
Yeah. I imagine
because it's the tarball code.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, there were anything that has padding bytes after it will explode with the new patch.
Yeah. What was the other thing you said? The visualization something?
Working on streams visualization stuff. It's kind of a documentation / write-up of both node streams and WhatWeG streams.
That's great. I'm looking forward to that. I think it'd be good to sort of figure out how we can head to some kind of common place with those eventually, even if it's like years out.
Yeah, definitely.
Good first step.
Thanks. I guess Peter.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for pronouncing my name correctly. Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't really working on anything io.js related since past week, so I have nothing to update you guys on. So please move on to the next person.
Which is Isaac.
How about we put Colin in there as well? I don't know.
Yeah. I think we do have differing orders sometimes. Let's throw Colin now. Colin, go.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll go. I've just been triaging issues on IO and Node. Opened a couple pull requests. I've been trying to help out with the merge of 0.10 to 0.12 over on Node. That's about all. Next.
I guess that is me. I have not been doing any io.js stuff. I've been I was kind of actually on vacation and doing almost no work at all over the last 2 weeks. And what coding I did do was on Big Boring System, which is not relevant to this call.
Michael.
I've been moving my house, and that's about it. I haven't been able to make the calls, but I have over the last few days I've been trying to catch up on GitHub issues and commented on a bunch of stuff. Some of it I think is actually in the agenda, so I'll just come to those later.
Okay, and I think that just leaves me. So I've been doing a ton of stuff all about build and CI. So I have redone all of the build slaves on Jenkins and introduced a ton more. I've got Ansible scripts for all of the Linux machines, so that includes CentOS version 5, 6, and 7, which was a little bit of a challenge to get all of them working, but they are working. Ubuntu, I've got all of the LTS releases plus the current 14.10, and I've got 32-bit versions of those as well included. We've got an ARM v7. We've got two ARM v7 slaves. One of them is with a new cloud provider that's offering ARM hosts. It's a little bit slow compared to the physical ARM hosts that I've got as well, but it's worth a try anyway. And Windows. I also spun up. Well, I've got two of each for Windows because it's a little bit unreliable. So we've got Windows 2012 times 2 and Windows 2008 times 2, which now works with the they have to use the Microsoft Visual Studio 2013 to work on both of those, but they are live and in the thing. And I've got a couple of interim OS X machines in there as well. They are interim because we've got some more permanent ones coming from Voxer that will be replaced, so we'll have a bit more sophisticated OS X in the mix there. But that's all working for io.js and libuv as well. So I've been also working on. So if you go to the build repo, io.js build, you'll see a lot of Ansible scripts and a big document for Windows on the setup procedure. So everything here is reproducible. The only thing that's not in there is the specific Jenkins setup and the secrets. I need to figure out a way to document the Jenkins setup, and anyone that is participating in the build project can get the Jenkins secrets. Now, I've also been working on the process towards a release. That's still in progress, and I will maybe reaching out to others for help in the next few days to get that going. But we're still on track to make a release on the 13th, I think it was. And I will talk a bit more about build later in the meeting. But that's what I've been doing. So moving on.
So I just had one question about the. So you said that you're really close to having the release done. Is there an issue or a thread somewhere that just has the remaining blockers for the first release?
No, there's not. There is a bunch. Adding these extra slaves to build has brought up a bunch of problems, and also a couple of mergers recently introduced additional problems. So there's a lot of little bugs to be fixed to get the CI working consistently. In terms of what's in the release, I don't think we've got a big grand plan, but let's talk about that I need to add a little item in the agenda on build that was supposed to be in there anyway. So I'll put that towards the end, and we could talk about the release plan.
Perfect. Thanks.
So we're going to do a quick review of last meeting. Just shout out if there's anything that you need to add to this, but I think mostly it was straightforward. The issue number 182, which was to remove sys after 3 years of deprecation, we came to a resolution on that. I think the resolution was to just add a deprecation notice, wasn't it?
Yep, that was the resolution.
So the next one was force require process to return a reference to process. That was passed, I think, with some I think it was Bert that objected to that, but that I think that's been merged now. File copyright policy is an ongoing drama that we'll talk about in the meeting. We've got an agenda item for that again. And rename V0.12 to V1.1.0 actually happened, and it became V1.x. So that's the current main branch on GitHub that we're all working from. And the merge strategy from joint node we talked about, and that was and V10 as well. The resolution there was simply to merge more often, so it's less of a drama. And there's a lot more nuance in that, and you'll find that in the minutes for last meeting. Is there anything else that anyone wants to raise about last meeting before we move on? Nope. Okay, so the first item on the agenda was to invite Colin to the TC. There's been an informal discussion, but there does need to be a vote now just to make sure it's formalized. So can we have a vote? Do we want to do +1s from everybody here?
Yeah, +1.
+1.
+1.
Yeah, Isaac.
I think we have quorum. So it's not an issue in this case, but I think just as this is the first time we're adding somebody, right? Like this is the first time we're adding somebody to the CC with an official vote in a meeting, or has this happened before?
No, Chris.
Hey.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We did add Chris.
No. So Isaac, just for your information, we did have a closed discussion about it first. So this is purely formal. We already
right.
Get it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I would suggest that when we do this, just as a kind of point of process, we have the formal vote without the person there, because if there were objections, it's kind of awkward to bring them up now.
I mean, ideally, it's actually it just happens in a thread, and the only reason to bring it up in the meeting is if the thread doesn't reach quorum for some reason.
Yeah,
right.
This was discussed a couple of meetings ago, and the agreement was to
absolutely
ask around informally. If there was any objection, I don't think Colin would even be here. So there was no objection.
No, of course. But I mean, just from if we're doing this to be official, I think we should actually change what we do to be official, and just instead in this meeting come with a resolution and say everybody already agreed on this. Here we are. I don't know. Maybe I'm quibbling over nothing.
Well, so the way I see it is that we've already got members of non-TC members here, myself and Michael, who are non-voters,
right.
And we will have additional people as well. So we can just look at it as this person is an invitee until they're formally accepted. And as far as I'm concerned, Colin can now vote on all of the issues that we're going to discuss. So we may as well just get down to business.
Yep, likewise.
Cool.
Okay, so that's done.
That was a +1 for everyone. I'll put that in the minutes to make sure that that's noted. So welcome on board, Colin.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes, welcome, Colin.
File copyright policy, and I'm glad we've got Michael here because Michael's been participating in this. We've had there's discussion in the issue number 216. I've also had an email discussion. I brought in our NodeSource General Counsel to get a legal perspective on this as well. And as usual with legals, it just it spirals out of control and doesn't end up being particularly clear. But so Michael would like to remove the whole header from each of the source files.
Oh God, yes, please.
Recommendation. I got a final recommendation out of our GC, which was can remove joint's name where it doesn't belong, but list who does own the copyright, which is the creator of the file. So that's the recommendation in terms of copyright at the top of the file. But I think Michael still thinks we should remove.
it's not actually the creator of the file. It's the creator of the file and everybody who edits it. So everybody owns their individual contribution to the file. That's why having a lineup there that just continually lists and adds people is a total pain in the ass, and not actually strictly necessary unless we're distributing the file as a distribution.
So yeah, we already have the top level license in the repo, and we have git blame. So we are tracking who has made which changes, right? There's really no need to have the big copyright notice in each file.
I kind of agree. Oh, sorry, Isaac. Yeah. No, go ahead.
I did actually. I was fearing having to do something like this with npm, and looked into this earlier last year, and like, this is legal superstition. It doesn't need to be there. It's a relic.
Yeah. So this is the reality, right? You license the distribution. However, license it. It needs to be one license per distribution. If say one of these files was individually inside of the repo, and we were sending that file around to different people as a distribution for some reason, then that file we would want to have that license block in it, just to note that this is its own distribution. It may have different licensing than the rest of the project, but we don't distribute the project that way. The project is a whole thing, and so we only need the license per project. And that license should note, and we can remove Joyent from that part of the license as well, because as far as I know, Joyent doesn't actually own any copyright to it. I don't.
So,
I mean, have
Ryan,
they asserted full ownership of any of the contributions that have come from other people?
They purchased Ryan Dahl's copyright.
That's fucking hilarious, because he was in Germany when he wrote half of that, and you can't even transfer that copyright. So
okay, take it up with the EU courts if you want to sue them over it. But the fact is, he wrote an awful lot of it in America as well, and including a lot of libuv, and Joyent does own some of those copyrights.
Okay. So it's okay. So then we actually do need to leave them in there. So then the license block should just say that copyright. God, is there a way to know which copyright is owned by them and which is owned by the contributors? Because they don't own a license to all of the other contributions. Or sorry, they don't own the copyright of all the other contributions. So.
It's actually a bit more complex than that even, because I used to work for Joyent for like a half a year. And the code I wrote in that time is actually copyright Joyent.
That for your code, okay? Because I don't think that they do that anymore. Their current employees, do they?
Also, if you don't not do it, then that's what happens. Like all the streams code, for example, that I wrote while a Joyent employee, that's all copyright Joyent. That's part of the whole invention, copyright, and trademark assignment that you do as an employee, as an engineer of most companies. The only way to get out of doing that is if you explicitly copyright it to yourself, and if the company can still come along and say hey, you did this, but no, we're taking it back. You were supposed to give this to us. So regardless, we don't need it in every single file because we're not distributing each file individually. The license says copyright Joyent and other contributors, that's fine. Let's just, we can just leave that. We don't need to take them out completely. A lot of it, they do actually own the copyright to, and it's not like it actually matters, because as long as you don't remove that, you can keep using it under the MIT license. So I think the simplest thing, the way to get rid of the kind of awful eyesore roadblock is to just remove all those blocks from each file. That's going to help contribution. And we can leave the license pretty much as is, maybe just add and io.js contributors or something like that.
No, I think the language right now is it's trademark Joyent and individual contributors or something like that. If we want to expand on the language, say individual contributors that you can look at with git blame or something, right?
Or even have a link to the git blame file on GitHub. We live in the modern age. We can just put copyright Joyent and other contributors and have a link. to the Git repo. Like but we don't even need to do that. We can just say copyright joint and other contributors, leave it in the license file, take it out of all the other files. I think that's just the simplest approach. That's like very legally defensible and not really, there's no reason not to do that.
We have a programmatically generated authors file now as well, so that should be authoritative if we need to link to something.
Yeah, actually,
but we don't even need to link to something. We just have to say that it's copyright the people who created the code. And if anybody ever says, well, who created the code? Well, we can get that information. Like, we don't need to, we don't need to declare the authoritative source up front. That actually kind of limits us in a weird way.
Is this something we should vote on? To vote on that we remove all copyright notices from files and just put them in the top-level copyright file?
I think you guys need to take responsibility for that decision.
Sorry, what was that, Rod?
I think you guys need to take responsibility for that decision, yes. So voting on it.
Okay, well, +1 for me.
I mean, does anyone actually object? Like, that's the question, right? Like, does anyone object to this?
Moving copyright notice to one file? No, that's a good idea, actually. It's also what V8 does and Mozilla, as far as I know. So I think there's
literally
enough.
every project in the last 20 years since like the invention of source control. Yeah, nobody objects to this. Let's just make a note of, we already have a note of who's here, so we're the ones taking responsibility for it. I think we're all comfortable with that.
Are we going to replace that block of text or remove it entirely, or leaving a little bit?
I think we should
it entirely. We have a license file. That's all you need.
Yeah, no. Well, I think Bert might be asking, are we going to modify the license file? And I think that we should table that. Like, let's just leave it as is, but remove all the individual blocks from the individual file.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good idea. Okay, I'm happy to pass on responsibility for all discussion on that because I just hate this stuff. So next item, I think most of us probably hate it. So next item is my one, which is a issue number or pull request number 233. The contributing doc was just getting very large, and there was a lot of interesting stuff in there that was lost. So I split it up into a bunch of stuff. There's I pulled out governance into a separate file, governance.md. I pulled out a file called contributorguide.md. I know it's collaborator guide, and that's intended for people who are added with commit access to the project, and that's got technical information about how to do merging, but also guidance on how to take responsibility for stuff. I think I'm quite proud of that one. The contributing.md now is just limited to how to contribute. It's very similar to the original contributing that I think you'll probably find in Joint Node as well. I also did, in that PR, I did a bunch of modifications to the README, just a cleanup, but I also removed a bunch of links to the Joint Node wiki because I don't think they're relevant right now. When we start making releases, we'll have our own links. And then down the bottom, I added the list of collaborators, so everyone with commit access, and highlighted those who are TC members. So the intention is there to highlight people who are collaborators and put it right on the README. So that the reason that was brought up for here and not just in GitHub was because there was a couple of minor modifications to governance. There has been some discussion in there. I haven't got the issue open. I'll just pull it up to read out those minor changes. They were fairly minor. It was just about adding the notion of collaborators into the governance section. So it's not just TC, it's also TC plus collaborators and how they relate. Most of the changes in there are simply about inserting collaborators into the process. So nothing major in terms of governance. There was some discussion with Michael in there about that and about voting on TC and stuff. My recommendation there was just to push that to a separate discussion because there's no huge changes to the governance process that I made in here. So I I think my preference would be to just get this in and then deal with TC process as a separate issue. Anybody got any comments on this?
So I agree that I think the contributing.md is getting a little bit hairy, and you want contributing.md to be the thing that a person who is sending a pull request in the project for the first time, like, what do they need to know?
Yeah.
And they don't need to know who's on the TC. They don't need to know how we vote on things. They need to know, like, write a test and make it pass, right? And other stuff like that. So yeah, that we should definitely like hack that way down and kind of break that up into simpler docs. I don't know if I just haven't thought of it. I don't know if governance.md is the best place to put that, or if it belongs in some other documentation or whatever. But maybe contributing.md should just kind of like reference that or link to it or whatever. But my only objection is like yet another top level file, right? That being said, yeah, yet another two top level files. I don't
want to go down the path of doing the whole wiki thing and having stale pages, and like that's kind of a mess. We could do a doc. We could put this in the docs directory, but I figure that if you're coming to the project, then governance is something that we want to highlight. We want to highlight that this is an open project. And
also it's you have to kind of imagine this is the thing that a lawyer dealing with an IP issue might want to be able to easily find, and they're not going to know to look in contributing. If they see a thing that says governance, they'll be like, oh, that's the thing I'm looking for.
Well, so with that in mind, like the reason why some of this stuff actually does need to be a top level notice is that if it's anything that a person implicitly agrees to by contributing to the project, then it needs to be at the top level. So like they implicitly agree to the license because it's at the top level and it's like a known pattern. We're basically saying that they're agreeing to the DCO by it being in the contributing file and the contributing file being sort of referenced when you send a pull request as well. So we don't want to move the DCO to like its own file, I don't think. We want to leave that like in contributing. Because there is like a special GitHub affordance for it, and like the code of conduct, like people implicitly agree to that, like when they contribute to the project, so it does need to be at the top level. I don't know if all of the ins and outs of the governance are agreed to by everybody contributing, so they potentially could not be at the top level.
So the contributing document is still big. I did try and pare it back a little bit because it's not if it's too large, people are just not going to read it. But there is a lot of good information in there about how to go about contributing. So we could do somebody could do another pass to try and simplify that. The one thing in there still that I haven't touched is the big block of stuff that it's just copied from Kane. And I didn't know what to do with that because I'm not sure exactly what the status of Kane is.
I think we should be free to remove this information, at least for now. So nothing has cancelled the git reward command, and yeah, we don't care about the Kane at the moment because
okay. Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks.
So Michael, the only thing that actually needs to be at the top level that people don't agree to everything at the top level when they contribute, right? They at least what I'm told by lawyers I've talked to about this, the whole thing with the DCO, and the reason why it is actually worthwhile is that when you submit your pull request, there's a link that's displayed to you that says, hey, click on this to learn about the rules for contributing. And so the DCO needs to be in contributing.md, but or any other like specific things that you are agreeing to need to either be in contributing.md or linked to from it. But if governance isn't in that, even if we say, well, you have to agree to the governance structure, the governance.md can still live wherever, right? We just need a link to it from inside of the contributing.md file.
Yeah, agreed.
Also, I put links to those on the README as well, so we could move them into doc if need be.
Okay, we can. It sounds like this is a bike shed. I agree with the general principle of what you're doing there, and it doesn't sound like anybody else objects.
So the preference is to move them into docs out of top level? There's a distaste for adding more top level here. Is that what I'm sensing?
Hold on, like just so that we can get to early quick agreement, why don't we just take the pull request as is and log separate issues for these other nitpicks, like moving stuff in the docs and moving and the changes to governance that we talked about and the other stuff as well.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yep, let's accept as is and then post a new issue saying there is too much crap at the top level.
Okay, any disagreement?
We can move some of those out.
I noticed there was some discussion about the TC may add additional members to the TC by unanimous consensus. Is that something you just wrote, or was it already in there?
No, it was already in there. That's why I want to move that discussion on to a later time. So
Okay.
TC adding, and then TC adding, removing, all those sort of voting things. I think Michael should open up a pull request to modify governance.md according to what he sees as a way forward, and then we should bring that discussion back here again.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know when the unanimous thing got added. So let's log an issue for it, and then maybe whoever added it and other people can tell me what the concerns were as to going to unanimous consent for that.
Okay.
Someone still needs to look good to me the actual pull request. One or two people should. Who's going to?
I will take a look at that.
Thank
and plus one it.
Okay, can I have one more volunteer?
I'll do it.
Okay, cool.
Okay. I've got to minute this, but I've got to introduce the next item. Isaac, could you take some notes about the action items there for that last one in the doc, please? Since you're doing such a good job of helping minute stuff.
Yeah, I'm whenever I start thinking about stuff that we're talking about, I stop taking notes.
Yeah, that's my problem too, and I'm about to do that again. So, issue number two, I can rewind and do stuff if need be. Issue number 234, which was something that we've been neglecting, adding new collaborators. So, along with the governance stuff, I introduced the whole concept of collaborators, and made sure that it was clear what these guys were all about. They're basically, they have commit access, and they can take responsibility for issues if they feel qualified, and then they can escalate things to TC that need to be, which is sort of outlined to be fairly minimal. Unless they're controversial issues or really major changes, they should just take responsibility for themselves, and then there can be discussion on GitHub. So I went through accepted pull requests for io.js and took out any that were relatively trivial. A lot of pull requests for docs, just changing grammar or reorganizing minor things. So I took them out, and then came up with a list of people who had made non-trivial contributions. So that list is in issue number 234. I gave a score for level of triviality or significance, just to start us off on a discussion. But does anyone have any feedback on level of significance other than let's just add them all? No.
Okay, I have not looked at this list.
So I gave it. This is a really subjective ranking of level of significance that includes lines of code, but also how much it's impacted the code base. The only
first of all, I think Matthias Binens, we should just let him upgrade Puny code.
That's what adding as a collaborator basically does.
Yeah. I don't want to see him adding other stuff necessarily, but we always just take his Puny code updates without even really looking at them. So
we'll use him for his Puny code. No, well, the idea is any additions here has got to be done through pull requests. So everyone, including TC members and collaborators, have got to do stuff through pull request, and there has to be a chance for discussion. So none of these people are going to be. We're not giving them authority to just add whatever they want. There's got to be a discussion process. So things get the governance and the collaborator guide talks about if there's disagreement, then you've got to try and reach unanimity. You can't just add stuff that that other collaborators are disagreeing to. So there's a process here as well.
So basically, this means those people can land their own patches instead of having a TC member needs to do it.
Given review by another collaborator. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And it also means these people can close issues and pull requests. It basically is broadening the load here from just this group basically to a lot more people that can actually take responsibility for cleaning up the issue list.
Yes, in general, I think it's a good idea. Of course, now there's a list of names, and I don't recognize all the GitHub handles, and I'm not always sure about everyone. So, can we?
That's what's fun about this.
Yeah, we gotta get better about this. In order to get better about it, we need to just get more comfortable with some objective analysis from somebody like Rod, and then just adding them. And if anything terrible happens, we'll just back out their code and remove them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, TC can remove people. That's fine.
So I would recommend this as an approach. Somebody who is not me, maybe take responsibility to actually go and look at each of these and see if there's anything that's hazardous. I think Bert, you'd be a good choice for that. You've got a good eye for whether or not somebody is going to be, or whether or not a patch was actually a good idea or not, or if they seem like they know what they're doing. But most of the other folks in the TC would be just as good. I just don't have time, and I've already agreed to two things. And then at the next TC meeting, we either approve them all or don't. Anybody else can also kind of go through and have their own opinions, but I feel like somebody should look over the list.
I just want to take on something there, which is looking at whether people know what they're doing. That there is this concept in the governance and contributor guidelines, which is you only take responsibility for merging something that you are qualified to deal with. So if you don't feel qualified to deal with it, don't touch it. And that's the recommendation.
They don't need to know Node inside and out. I think that's. I might have sort of mischaracterized what I was saying.
No, so one of my favorite projects for this is Learn Your Node, right? Where I get pull requests all the time to change grammar, which is fine. But then occasionally I'll get a pull request which does like a big rework of some docs just to make it more interesting. And often it's from people who are just learning Node or even just learning JavaScript. And I'll add them to the repo because that's what the project says. If you make a significant contribution, I'll add you. And these people who are just learning Node get added to this thing, and they're all excited. And they know where their boundaries are. They know that they're not really qualified to go in and make or even accept big changes to code in there. They know that they're sort of limited in their own scope, and it works out fine. Yeah. Everyone knows their place. But people also take responsibility for commenting and closing issues, so it's great.
So that's actually kind of what I meant when I said know what they're doing. Make sure that they kind of seem to understand how open source works and what the process is, and not people that we think are going to be likely to have to get reverted. But it's a judgment call, and it doesn't actually matter that much, right? The cost of adding somebody incorrectly is not that high.
That's true.
Okay. So
you know what I'm a little bit uncomfortable about though is what if I come back next week and I'm like, okay, let's add all these guys except for LXE because I don't really like this person. Having these discussions about sort of the value of individual contribute. This was just an example, by the way. I don't even know this guy LXE.
Sure.
Or maybe it's a woman. If you want to discuss the quality of individual contributions, it's that's one of those things that is not so great to do out in the open. The other thing is, I can go over the list. I think I will come up with a top 5. I think maybe that's a better way to go at it. I'll identify the 5 most valuable people here, or the people I have most confidence in, and Chris and Colin, if you're ready to help out, like please do it as well, and do it sort of on your own, so we can compare a little bit and don't indulge in groupthink too much.
So
This is like
another thing.
So we agreed to a contribution policy that was more liberal and that was in sort of a different vein, and by sort of dipping our toes into it this way, we're not actually agreeing to it or even trying it out. And one of the we've been talking about one of these. Oh, like, well, no, really, we can't trust people this much, or if there's a cause for concern. And I mean, like, the arduousness with which we've already had to go through to try and get people added, like, we haven't been adding people, like we said. We now have had this list up it's been up there like almost a week that Rod put it together. We still have, like, people haven't even looked at it yet. I'm much more inclined to just say, look, like, every 2 weeks Rod comes up with this list, and if you object to anybody, then we'll remove them, and you can object privately if you're not comfortable objecting publicly, but everyone at it. I mean, like, let's just fucking add people, and if there's a problem, then we'll deal with it and we'll stop adding people so liberally. But I mean, if we're not actually trying this out, then we're not actually going to learn anything from it, right?
So Michael, the problem is that we have a backlog, right? It's unlikely. We have a backlog, and we have a little bit of and we've acknowledged this. We have some like documentation requirements. We have some issues for like onboarding new contributors that we just need to kind of deal with, right? We have like it's almost like technical debt in a way, where we have like documentation debt and cultural debt. And so I think that we could just say add everybody, start it right now, make a major shift, or I think. But I'm not sure that that's actually going to end up doing right by the people we add or by the people in this group. It's adding a lot of kind of mentorship requirements that we don't really have bandwidth for because we haven't scaled up gracefully. Okay, so I think one way to approach that is just to add in a smaller amount. Like, say we're going to add 10 people, and then next week we add another 10, and next week we add another 10. Like, we'll get there. But in adding those first 10, maybe we'll find, wow, there was no problems. They didn't run into a bunch of hiccups and snags, so now we can accelerate or not. You know what I mean? But it's a little bit less of a just throw everybody in the deep end.
Yeah, I agree with Michael, or sorry, with Isaac. We should just start with, let's say, if we add five seems really enough for me. See how it goes, and then next week add another 5, or if we feel we can scale faster, we will add a bigger group at that time. But I think it's too aggressive to just find everyone and make them all collaborators. We don't know what it will do. Maybe everybody will start bugging us, and we won't have time to make the release next week. That sounds, or we would be forced to ignore them.
I think you're looking at this in the wrong way, because these people are not going to add overhead. They're actually going to take away some of your burden. It's not going to be mentorship requirements. These people know what they're doing. Like, they've contributed. That's all. That's the low bar for entry. They know how to contribute. That's all.
I'm just speaking as somebody that has gone through this process. Sorry, crosstalk. Speaking as someone that's gone through this process recently. It helps to have a point of contact to actually know what the scope of your responsibilities are. I kind of worry about adding a bunch of people and then them not really like having a resource to go to in the form of like somebody who's already a contributor to let them know like what's expected of them and what's not. Like I'd feel much more comfortable adding more people, as like if we could say like here 2 people, like one person can mentor 2 people, and we can, based on availability of the TC or other collaborators, like have them onboard people.
Hold on. These are not like full-time contributors. These are not people that are paid to work on it full-time. Like they don't look like that. Most of them are going to be very part-time if they ever commit anything again at all, right? Like the point of adding them as collaborators is to get them in the mix and encourage them to work on it a little bit more. But they're at a very different end of the long tail than like the people that are currently on the TC, or even the people that we've been adding as collaborators in the past, right? Like, I mean, if you want to actually learn from this process and actually figure out if this works or not, rather than say let's just add a couple people, take the whole list that there is right now, add them, and then not add anybody else until we come back around and look at what the experience was like for those people. Like that's the way to actually learn if this process works, and to go at it somewhat slowly. Because if it doesn't work, then we can just go and remove all of them. And if they don't do anything and they're not a lot of overhead, then we haven't lost anything. And if they add,
can I suggest a compromise?
Yeah.
So my compromise would be let's table this for next meeting, and I would like to see just adding all of them unless there are individual objections. But give everybody here a chance now that we've just discussed this for people to look through this list and be comfortable with this, but also look at the collaborator guide that I wrote in the other pull request, which a couple of you have agreed to review. That will go in at the top level, and that contains basically the onboarding for these people. So the process, how to take responsibility, all that sort of stuff. So if you guys want to get comfortable with all that stuff, then come back next week and let's take a vote on all of them.
Yeah, and that also that appeases any concerns that we have with it fucking up the release, right? Because that'll be after the release or around the exact time of it. So.
True.
Okay, so we'll give you guys a week to get comfortable. That's fine.
Yes. Although I kind of reserve my right to
object. That's fine.
Well, to object to adding everyone in one go.
That's fine. I accept that. But yeah, have a look over the list. Look at the document, and just think about these people in terms of their part-time or maybe not even any more contributions. Not these guys being paid to work on it. Okay, I'll minute that. Unless is there any other objections to what I've just outlined? No. Okay, we're going to move on.
So Rod, just to clarify, then it sounds like the real decision here is, which we're going to decide next week, is between now and next week, TC members take a look at the list and have feelings, have opinions. I try to say opinions and feelings at the same time. I got feelings, and then next week we'll decide whether we want to add everyone, add specific people, or have some kind of waiting list that we sort of process with a set throughput level.
Yeah. So Michael and I have been doing this in our projects, and we recognise the awesome benefits of it, and that's why we're advocating so strongly for it. But we recognise as well that it's something that you guys are probably not. Haven't done directly, maybe, or Isaac, you've done a bit, but
I have, and it's not just that. I think that it's there's a little bit of selection bias, right? So that depending on which project you're talking about, some things are going to attract newcomers a little bit more. Some things are going to attract more senior people, more experienced people. The thing that I do, and what I've kind of settled on for most of my newer projects, is if you submit a pull request and it takes a very small amount of coaxing to get it to a good place, I'll go ahead and just add them as a collaborator without too much ceremony. And especially if I see them kind of helping out in other, if you see them making good suggestions on other pull requests. If somebody submits a patch that breaks all the tests and I have to kind of explain to them how to write a test, I'll do that mentorship, but I'm not going to add them as a collaborator until they do a few more of those. And there's a little bit of subjectiveness there, but I think that kind of adding somebody as a collaborator, asking them to do this mentorship work, even if it's extremely part-time, even if it's only once in a great while, when there comes a pull request and they see it, you're gonna want them they're going to say something about that pull request, and you don't want them having the little contributor star next to their name if they actually don't know what they're talking about.
Well, then you have another contributor coming back up and disagreeing.
Yeah, can you just look at the list and apply that?
But that's exactly why you need to just kind of throttle it until we get to a point where we have that list of contributors, because right now we don't. Yes.
Well, no,
I agree,
but
Ben. Let's move on.
you're talking about two separate things. Like you're saying, one, you're saying you want to apply this subjective barrier, which is fine. Just go through the list and apply that and see how many people pass it, rather than an arbitrary limit of 5, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, so whether or not we have a throttle is one of the things that we'll decide on next week.
Okay, we've got to move on.
Yes.
So let's just go
Yep.
with that. That seems like a workable compromise. Okay, moving on. This one is for you, Ben. Upgrading V8 to 3.31.74.1, which is issue number or pull request number 243. Ben, take it away while I write up minutes.
Okay. Yeah, there is a new V8 release. I did the upgrade earlier today. It's a pull request now. It gives you a couple of nice features. ES6 classes, what we all have been waiting for. It gives you let and const in strict mode without having to specify a flag on the command line. Same goes for Harmony string functions like start with. I am forgetting something. Oh yeah, template strings are also no longer behind the flag and actually work, which is nice. And supposedly it's also a bit faster. However, how well that works out remains to be seen, of course. And there is little API breakage this time around. Actually, I didn't have to touch anything in Node itself. In io.js, it compiled cleanly. So yeah, what's not to like? The only thing is, of course, we're going to do the first alpha release in about a week, so maybe it's a bit on the short side to shake out any bugs. Well,
No, land it.
Land
Fix
it.
it. Land it.
Okay.
Plus
Anyone
Yeah, I'm also in favor of landing it. But yeah, I mean, you have a better feeling for its stability, I guess, since you've already tried it. But yeah, if it
Yeah,
doesn't
and I've
break
been
it-
running D8 for a while as well, and it seems to be working nicely. There is, however, one thing that I should mention.
Here come the dragons.
Well, I suspect that no one will care, but the post-mortem support was broken once again, and I didn't feel like fixing it, so I just ripped it out. And I expect that most of you will say post-mortem support.
No,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
won't fix
I think Join uses it, or maybe they no longer don't. But yeah, well, like Isaac says in the chat, they can fix it themselves. So.
I think I'm going to fix
Also,
it.
Oh, are you
sounds
using
good.
it, Fedor, or is Foxhor using it?
Yeah, well, kind of, yeah. So I have a utility called Quarter Dump, and it is using this postmortem support from V8 quite actively. I guess some other tools might be using it as well. So, like, if you are using Python scripts for LLDB or stuff like that to, translate JavaScript stack traces to strings, it won't work without a postmortem sync. So I think not only Joint will care about it.
My biggest concern with not taking it now would be that we would basically put out this alpha release and then another and another, and then we'd have all these releases out where we're finding bugs, and then before the final release of 1.0, we're going to swap it out anyway. I'd rather just be finding bugs in the current V8 during that time period rather than an older one, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about not landing it, so I'm just saying that I'm going to fix it afterwards. So yeah, that's fine for me for now.
if there's any bugs, we can shake those out in point releases, right? Like we can shake those out in patch releases. That's what that's for. Let's just use Semver for what it's for. It's a breaking change. It's 1.0. Now's where we should land it.
Well,
Go.
yes, and everybody's speaking about an alpha release, but as far as I'm concerned, it should be basically an API stable release, and so after that we fix issues, but it's not like, oh, we're gonna make some more API changes and then release a beta. I don't want to do that.
Nope.
It doesn't buy us anything.
We can call it an RC1 release.
No, let's just 1.0.0. And you know what?
Yeah.
The first
And it's
bugs that we find, we fix them and we do 1.0.1. Like, let's
Well,
just do
Exactly.
December.
we need
It's
to find
good.
a way to set the expectation that this is an alpha or beta release, right? Like
The .0 does
we
that.
I don't
That's
think
what that means.
that doesn't mean that to other people, though. I mean, Google keeps
It does.
data for 5 years or something, right? Like I think that
Okay, Google, yeah, but not Node users. Like, look in NPM. Look at how Node users release their own code. This is like 1.0.0 is the first release. This is something that we should just accept.
1.0, but like I mean, all I'm saying is that we just have to find a way to set the expectation. If you want to call it 1.0, that's fine. 1.0. Like somewhere on the website, we need to say like, hey, this is a beta release.
Okay, maybe we call it a beta release, and then the gamma release is 1.0.2. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we just say
Can we move
this is
on
1.0.0. Like, that's the version.
Can we finish up this item, which is landing the V8 patch, and then move the? I've got another item which is to talk about build and release. So can we just isolate those two things?
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody agrees landing V8.
Land V8.
Okay. And Fedder's going to take care of. You want to fix that stuff that the post-mortem support? I don't even know what that is. Didn't know that thing existed.
Yeah, it's mostly about the debugging symbols in the binary.
Okay.
But like some custom symbols. So like offsets in the raw JavaScript objects and stuff like that. So it's mostly working with a raw memory outside of the V8s and outside of the node, so in core dumps and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to fix it after it will be landed in io.js. So yeah, that's fine for me.
I disabled the post-mortem support. Do we want to re-enable it again? I mean, re-enable it by default?
I think it was broken, no?
Yeah, it was broken. So one of the patches, one of the commits in the pull request, basically just disables it and rips out the code from the zip files. Rips out the configuration from the zip files.
Okay.
You should take a look, Fedor.
Could you please keep the zip config stuff in? Just make the configuration variable be false for postmortem by default. That should be fine,
I mostly did that. Like I said, take a look at the pull request and all will be clear.
Okay, yeah. If you could please send me a link again.
I can send you a link, and I will send you a link.
Okay,
however, my question is, do we want to re-enable it by default, or do we want to keep it turned off?
Well, if it is broken right now, so if it breaks the build, then probably no. I think.
Yeah. So right now it breaks the build because, well, it simply doesn't compile. If you fix it, then we can turn it on. However, I'm kind of afraid that the next upgrade will break it again and again and again. I think part of the problem is that no one ever sends the fixes upstream to V8.
I kind of do, but not always. So
not always.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, not forever V8 release. So they usually is renaming some stuff and changing it, and not. They don't have any tests for postmortem, so they are not even trying to build it on their build boards. So yeah. So, but when I find that it's broken, I'm usually sending a pull request to them. Yeah. So yeah, I was the guy who was supporting it.
Okay. How about you guys take this discussion back to GitHub and
yeah, makes sense.
work on how to land. Okay.
Sounds like a plan. I'll send you the link, Fedor.
Thanks.
Okay. The last item I have, which is build and release. Given that release is scheduled for before the next meeting, I'm assuming at this point that that we will get to a release okay by that date. It'll be a bit of work on my part, but I'm keen to get there. I have a few questions, and I did actually, from a few meetings ago, I did commit to coming with a more formal release plan for you guys to approve, but I haven't done that. So I figured we could discuss some of those issues here and then just on GitHub probably before we get to somewhere to release. So the items I have to discuss are we still haven't got the CI feeding back into GitHub to show build status, and we don't have obvious indicators of what's failing and what's not. That's still something I'm working on, and it's basically I've got too much on my plate, and that will be done, but just not before release. So that means that the failures are not as visible to everyone. So what I would really like for you guys to focus on before release is to just be aware of what's failing in the Jenkins builds and try and get some of those tests passing, because if there's anything in there that we're missing that is a serious failure, then we need to get that fixed as soon as possible. So please look through the Jenkins failures and try and make them more resilient. If you want, so a couple of people have access to Jenkins to trigger builds on any arbitrary commit on any io.js repo on GitHub. If you want that, just let me know and I can give that to you, so you can test out fixes or anything. And there was something else I was going to say, but I've forgotten. But basically, just have a look through the Jenkins builds. I will put a link in the doc so you can see that actually. So please help minimize failures so we can have a clean release.
Rod, can I still log in on the ARM servers? There's more than one now, I think.
The one you had access to, I believe you still have access to. If you can't, let me know when you should be able to. If you can't, let me know and I will add you back in. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so next item on my list I have to discuss is there any point in doing a 32-bit OS X release? No.
We've always done that, but I think it makes no sense to do that.
Well, it depends. I was talking to a Chromium developer last week, and he told me that they have an insane amount of users that are on 10.6 still. I don't know if that's if there's a big overlap between Chromium users and io.js developers, but well, something to keep in mind.
And what about 10.6, 10.7?
Oh yeah, he didn't say.
Okay.
I didn't think to ask either. So
I just thought it was related to the 64-bit story. Yeah. Okay, I see.
Okay, well, it's only an initial release, so let's just go with 64-bit on OS X for now. That's fine. Binary naming was something I had, but Ben, you said you're taking care of the renaming of the binary in the builds. Is that right? How's that going?
Okay, it's going well smoothly. The only thing is I'm not sure how to approach Windows because of the lack of symlinks.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to ping Bert for that.
Yes, that's okay. I think we already agreed I would do that. So.
Yep.
That's okay.
Now, are we going to add a symlink in the build for Node so that at the top level you've got an io.js binary and Node binary symlinks into our /release, whatever?
Is that a question or a statement?
That's a question. Are we going to have a symlink in the when you do a make? Will that make a symlink for Node for you in the top level as well, so that we don't have to go and change all the tests?
Yeah, I think that would be nice. When you say, oh, you mean in the top level directory of the repository?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we can just keep a node link there. I was talking more about when you install.
Yeah, no, the install thing is a separate thing, and I think we're all in agreement that we will release an io.js binary, but also have a symlink in for Node. And Bert did have a suggestion for making a small executable for Windows that would do a redirection. I think Bert is the man to figure out the Windows approach.
Yes, I'll do that. As far as making a symlink in the top-level directory, I'm not sure. I don't think we make on Windows, we don't do it for the Node binary at this point, so the tests are just run from the release directory. I think if you rename the binary, the tests would just still pass because they would use process.exec path.
Of course.
It wouldn't make any difference. And the other issue is that creating symlinks requires elevation, so that's not an issue for the installer, but it is a problem for when you're just in your terminal because you cannot create symlinks. It's really lame, I know, but that's what it is. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll take care of the sort of alternative name. It might be either a symlink or a small stub executable. I don't know yet.
Okay, I'll hassle you for that if we get close and that needs to be done. Now, the next thing was to talk about which binaries we would build. So I have on my list Windows 32 and 64-bit. I don't think it makes any sense to remove Windows 32-bit because they're still very popular. There's no reason to remove them, and they're easy to build too.
Yeah, keep them. I think, but that's mostly for Windows XP users that will use it. What I actually don't know if Node still works on Windows XP. I mean, I don't think we have build bots that test it, right?
No, so because we can only compile with Visual Studio 2013, we can only test on the equivalent of Windows 7 and 8. So that's 2008 and 2012. So yeah. What I'm suggesting here, I think, is that we say that we're only supporting 2007 and above.
Right. And build a 32-bit binary anyway.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I mean, I still use this on Windows. I'd still use the 32-bit binary because in a lot of places because this it's fine on Windows and you don't need that much memory usually for a node process. Anyway, OS X 64-bit we're going with built on OS X 10.10 with Xcode 6, and I'm being told I believe that should be compatible with 10.9 as well. If we build on there, does that sound right? I just don't know about OS X.
When you compile, you can specify a minimum OS X requirement, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's a maximum, so a maximum counterpart where you say, hey, don't use any APIs that are not available in at least 10.9.
Right.
Fedor, I think you program on OS X more often than I do, so I'm looking to you.
I think this is correct.
Okay. I'll play with that. So what I might try and do is have some initial binaries for people to test out just while I, shave these yaks, and that would help to get feedback on that. Linux now, we do have CentOS 5 working in the build system, which is amazing. So we're still compiling with that, but we are pulling in GCC 4.8 to do that. As we are on a couple of others. So we're either building on 4.8 or 4.9 on the various Linuxes. The only problem with releasing binaries from compiled there is that I believe we need to statically link in libs stdc++ to make it work on machines that don't have that version of GCC installed. Does that sound right and acceptable?
Wait, you have to link. Oh wait, is this for Debian machines or for?
So I only tested on Debian I think it was Debian actually, making binaries portable. But I'm assuming the same thing applies for CentOS when I upgrade GCC. If I want to make a binary on CentOS 5 with GCC 4.8 that runs on a vanilla CentOS 5 or RHEL 5. I'm still assuming I have to statically link in libs stdc++.
Okay, so the thing is, we use C++11 features, but not library features. So at least in theory, it should be possible to use an old version of lib stdc++.
So is V8's not using library features from?
Yeah, exactly, and io.js isn't either, or at least it shouldn't. So, yeah, like I said, at least in theory, we should not need to link statically.
Okay. Okay, well, that wasn't true for my tests on Debian Wheezy, but I can test it out. I'll test it out on that CentOS box and see if I can make universal binaries.
Okay, if you can give me access to one of those machines, I'll give it a spin as well.
Cool. Okay. I'll do that. Now, I'm keen to make ARM builds first class here. So we have ARM v7 in Jenkins building every time, and that's going really well. So I'd like us to release a ARM v7 binary as well at the same time. Currently built on Ubuntu 14.04. I don't know if it makes sense to do anything more complicated than that. And perhaps even an ARM v6, so that Pi users can just grab a binary straight off this thing. But that'll take longer to compile and may hold up releases if we necessitate that. So that might be a nice addition, given that the binaries might land a bit delayed. So I'd like to try and get ARM v6 in there as well. But yeah, so they're the binaries I've got listed that we will try and dump. We'll also dump the source and SHA-sums for each of these blobs that we're dumping. There's a bunch of other things that are released from Joint Node, just binaries and files. I don't know if anyone's actually using them. Isaac, do you know about the history of those things? Can we just release these tarbles and not have people complain that they're missing these random files?
Sorry, which files?
Let me find the link to it. If you go to any release from, like, let's go to 1035.
In like the .lib and the .pdb files?
Yeah, .exe, .exp, .lib, .pdb. There's the OpenSSL.
I think the lib and the PDB stuff is all Windows-y things.
Yeah, if you're doing sorry, Isaac. Yeah, if you're doing add-on development on Windows, then you want the .lib and the .pdb. Well, Bert can tell you all about it, but...
Well, so the .lib file is downloaded, I think, by node.js, so it can, because the compiled add-ons need to link against something in order to be able to use symbols from Node. The PDB contains the bug information, which is generally, I've never used it. I don't know why it's uploaded for Node. I guess someone ever asked for it, but I think you can safely leave that out.
Okay.
And there's also I think a loose exe file, right?
Yep.
I don't know if people use that. As far as I know, people typically use the installer because they want npm. So I would maybe not, to start off with, like, not upload that. Just upload the lib file and the MSIs.
And then for Windows, there's an x64 directory that has the same things. If we're going to do the .lib .lib, then we're going to have that x64 to remain compatible with Node.js, I assume.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think Node.js needs to be updated a little bit anyway, because it downloads Node tarball. So if you would try to build something for io.js, it would try to find a Node tarball, which isn't there, and then.
So on that topic, the only reason that it should need to download that tarball now is for Windows, because the header files are included in each of the Node releases, and they have been for some time now. So if somebody's going to update Node.js, I started on this a while ago but never finished.
I think that's also a better strategy. Indeed, like, I don't know if headers are included in the Windows installer, but we probably should, and we should also just include the .lib file, which is very small, and then all the assets needed to use Node.js are just installed. Seems much nicer. So yeah, why not? Let's not upload the lib file. I'll take a look also at that before next week.
Okay. So I won't hassle with them.
One quick remark about the .exe. I know a few people that actually use it. People that are on corporate machines where you don't have admin access, so you can't install software, but you can still download a single exe file and run that. So much for corporate security.
So, what can we do the same as we do with the Darwins there? Which, like, you instead of providing the raw exe, can we provide a zip file that's got exe and lib in it? So you get an MSI or a zip file. Does that sound like a better approach?
Bert?
That sounds reasonable, but it's a little bit too much work because of how the WIX installer build works. I cannot do that for next week, but so for next week maybe just produce an MSI and then we'll see after that if we can add it.
Yeah, the way I'm seeing this release is that it's more about the release process and the build process, and we're going to get reports back that this doesn't work for people in various ways, and that will help us to tune that. So let's just throw it out there and see what happens, and then iterate quickly to make it even better. Okay, so going to leave out those extra files for now. Discuss with Bert. The next one was back to the discussion we had before about version number. I believe most people have been working on the assumption this would be a 1.0.0-alpha something or other. But Isaac, I think you were suggesting you just go with 1.0.0. Is that right?
Yes.
Anyone else got thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would call it a RC1, so people won't bitch on Twitter how buggy io.js is.
I think that for the official version number, I think that we should drop all of the pre-release tags. We can still, we can put in the release notice, like this is the, this should be treated as a beta or a pre-release or whatever. That's all just in messaging. But I think as far as version numbers go, it's just so much easier to not have those, pre-release tags.
It's certainly easier for building add-ons. That much is undoubtedly
Oh my goodness, yeah. Oh my goodness, it's easier for everything. It's just easier to know what we're talking about. We should just use Semver for what it's for, and maybe even make that part of the thing. Hey, we're gonna have a 1.0.1 in a few weeks with bug fixes, we're sure. So tell us what those bugs are. But I think what happens is if you put -beta on it, nobody uses it, and then when you do have the big release, they still bitch on Twitter anyway. You can't stop people from complaining about your bugs. We should just be hey, here we go. Tell us what the bugs are.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
What about this? What if the website basically says io.js beta released, and then but all of the versioning internally in the release and everything else is just 1.0, and we iterate from there. But we we don't put 1.0.0 on the main website and in the PR messaging.
Bike shed.
It's not real. I mean, this is a big deal for the project.
I mean, I think as far as the decision goes, the decision sounds should it just be 1.0 or should it be 1.0 beta? And I'm strongly in favor of 1.0 without the beta flag. But
is anybody not in favor of that?
It's listed a dozen technical reasons why it's better too. It's better technically if we keep it without these crazy tags on the end of it. The rest is just all I'm saying is that we should not be referring to it as 1.0 if anybody here talked to the press. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. We should refer to it as a first release. We're still kind of figuring this out. Blah blah blah. We're looking for people to give us feedback. This kind of stuff. But that's the part that's the bike shed. What we should put on the website is the bike shed.
Okay.
The actual decision, I think, is just 1.0. It's so much better in every possible way.
Okay, I'm not hearing any objections. So we'll go with that.
Not for me.
Okay, good. So that brings us to the next one, which is website. So far, we haven't had any traction on getting a group of people doing website, but we really we've got a server that we can put stuff on, but we have no place to make announcements or do anything formal with that. We don't have a team that's interested in doing that. That's a concern. I would like to nominate that Michael take responsibility for something about the website. Do you have time for that?
You want me to do the design of the website?
No, not design. We need a site, and nobody's stepping up so far.
Maybe if you make it really ugly and have a really big
and then somebody will.
send pull requests if you think it's really ugly.
Yeah, Comic Sans.
That hasn't been working so far. I mean,
Oh my God! I've got an idea. I've got an idea.
Get Jen Schiffer to do it.
What if it looked exactly like the original Node site? Like not the one that Joint commissioned, the one that Ryan made.
Yeah, but that was also incredibly ugly. So yeah, maybe it works, but
Yeah.
no.
I'd like some sort of resolution here. I don't want to have to be writing additional software to make a layout for blogs or anything.
Okay, I'll do it. Okay, fine, I'll do it.
Okay, so you're gonna go to that website, go to the website repo, and it's actually io.js.github.io repo, and comment in that thing. Just take ownership of that thing for now, and try and find someone to take it on.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so we'll need to do an announcement in there, just a simple blog thing, and Comic Sans, and choose the worst logo out of the logo list, and we'll be awesome. Now, this is a bit of a bike shed, but I wanted to talk about a directory naming for releases, because I'm assuming we're going to have much more rapid releases, and I don't really like the idea of having a single directory that just has every release in it. And so I'm wondering if we should go down a path of something like having a io.js.org/downloads/major version number / then the full version number, so that we group these things by major version, and then we have a hierarchy of sorts. Does anyone have a suggestion on that's better than that?
Well, if we want to make it easy for people like the NVM maintainers, then it would be, well, it would definitely be easiest to just mirror what's on node.js.org right now.
So yeah, I think a single directory with all of them. I mean, even if we have weekly releases, right? Like, it's going to be what 100 years before we blow out the limit of what you can put in a directory. Like, it's probably fine. I mean, it's okay. It's kind of obnoxious to look at. Like, it's like, oh, there's like 100 things in here, meh. But it's fine.
So the idea was to have a better indexing system as well for the downloaders. So we were going to do a JSON file and an equivalent text file that pointed to where all the releases were. So we could, if we had a hierarchy, then we could have a file at the top that says these are all the releases, and this is where to go to find them. And then in each of those directories, we have all the binaries. So that was my assumption for how we could handle that. But is everybody here?
I mean, we should have. I would love to have a dist folder which looks exactly like the node.js.org dist, and then we can link into it via a million different possible ways. But having that one index of everything is like super handy.
We can have both, right? I mean, we're not actually hosting on FAT12, so we can just symlink everything.
Right.
Okay, so you want to have a dist that mirrors what is done on node.js.org, but we can experiment with alternatives. Okay, that sounds like a way forward. Okay, and lastly, do you want to aim for having nightly builds as well, where if there are new commits and CI is passing, automatically churn out nightly builds? I'd love to be able to aim for that. I know it's probably not an immediate discussion, but does that sound like a good idea?
Yes, definitely yes.
And then that brings up the question of where you put them and how you structure the directories, but I'll leave that bike shed till later. Okay, I think that was all I had on my list for discussing releases. I'll probably take it up with individuals when I've got problems, and then what I'll do is I'll post a more formal release plan to the build repo and get you guys to comment on that if you've got any objections.
I have a couple of questions about the release. So, well, basically there's three things. First of all, I think Node is still struggling with merging 0.10 and 0.12 into 0.12. And of course, we don't have to wait for that, but I wonder if anyone is aware of patches that should be merged before 0.12 that are only in 0.10 at this point. Well, right now it's like total silence.
Wait, can you say that one more time?
So, like node.js, right? That other project that we formed.
Yeah, I've heard of node.js. Something with JavaScript, right?
So, yes. So for, I don't know, for months, 0.10 has not been merged into 0.12. And now, like for the past month or so, there has been a pull request which is not done and not merged, where they try to merge 0.10 into 0.12. Now, I don't think io.js hasn't merged 0.10 either, or did we?
No, we didn't.
Is there anything that we sort of should be merging?
Maybe the OpenSSL fixes, but I think Fedora said that 0.12 is actually fine, Fedora.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I think O12 in io.js is fine, but O12 in Node.js is not fine.
Okay, so we don't actually have to merge Node 0.10. Okay, we can leave that alone then. Then there is internationalization, which we sort of got by merging joint node. And I kind of hate this patch. There's two things. Now, it seems that joint is, or joint node is moving to building with a small ICU. So you get the Intel object, and it only supports English. So the question is whether we think that's the right thing to do, or that we will just do it because Node does it, or nobody cares. I think the biggest problem I have with the whole internationalization support is now, in order to build Node, I have to download some ICU zip file somewhere on my machine, and it might get outdated. And there's a patch which hasn't landed in Node yet, so io.js doesn't have it either, where every time I build, that file gets downloaded. And I will hate this very much.
That's already in io.js because of the merge from this week.
Mm-hmm.
But it's opt-in. You need to explicitly specify what is it -- with Intel when you run configure.
Okay.
Otherwise it builds a binary without Intel support.
Okay, well, that's fine for me. I think Node is moving to a model where they build with limited Intel support.
Yeah, but only for releases. So
Mm-hmm.
if you download tarball or you check out the repository and you just run configure with no flags, then it will just build a binary without internationalization.
All right. So what are we going to do for releases? Rod, do you know?
And CI as well. Do we want to have the enable small ICU done for CI as well?
Yeah, I personally think that would be great. It is, however, annoying that it keeps downloading the tarball from icu.org. It's also a pretty big tarball. It's like 28 megabytes, and I presume it won't shrink.
It doesn't. It uses it if it's already downloaded it, doesn't it?
No, that's true. But if you wipe out the directory and clone the repo again, which is what the CI does, I think.
I think there is a flag in the configure to point to an existing ICU file, so you could actually just download it and put it in your home directory and configure it and point to there.
Well, yes. Okay, so I know that's all possible. However, I don't know. I like Node and io.js to be things that just work, and you don't have to you don't get too many options when you build it. And so we should have a sensible default. And so like there's basically two things.
You're Bert.
We can say never mind. Like nobody ever. Oh, I'm not breaking up here.
Bert can hear Bert just fine. Hey, I have to I have to head off, but I think Bert and Ben, I think that your opinions and aesthetic on how awful it is to have to download a tarball is like absolutely spot on. I'd rather just make the code bigger and include it, even if that's what it takes. But
Yes, put it in the GitHub. Yeah.
Yeah, or whatever we have to do. I'm going to do the same thing we do with OpenSSL. We don't download OpenSSL when you build Node. That's ugh. So anyway, I'm going to. I have to head off.
Sorry.
To another thing, so I'm going to take my leave, and I defer my vote to Bert and Ben.
All right.
Cheers, Isaac.
Cheers.
Yeah.
I actually also have to go. But this
Okay.
is like I'm just curious what we're going to do for the build. Are we going to include internationalization in our release or not? Right, that is.
Yeah, for releases. Oh, sorry, Rod. Yeah, I would like to do that for releases. The release for next week is maybe a bit too short term.
Okay. It seems that everybody has to go, so maybe indeed the best way forward is to not enable Intel for the version 1 release.
Okay. Okay, I'm happy with that. I would have done small ICU without any input on that, but that's fine.
I don't know. Okay. Shit.
No,
Yeah,
okay.
let's do what we do best and punt on it for another week.
I have to actually go. I forgot. But I'll open an issue and we can decide before next week.
A good idea. Okay, great. Okay, that brings us to the last item, which is next meeting. I'm guessing that a week's time will be fine, even though the release was scheduled for the 13th, day before, unless we want to have a meeting before the release.
That might be good.
Yeah, a quick scrum to just go over any outstanding issues.
That's if we have a release ready.
If we can move it a day earlier, that would be a good thing, I guess.
I think it would be. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it would be there because it's the 14th for me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a meeting before the release then, and we can give sign off. Cool.
Cool. Chris is also +1.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks everybody. Unless there's anything else you want to bring up before we close. Nope. Thanks everybody, and
thank you so much. Sorry, I have to run. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Okay. Stopping broadcast.